The show that helped build Netflix into what it is today has since been erased by the very platform it helped create. Every episode that Netflix commissioned, produced, and used to announce itself as a serious content player is now gone. And not canceled in the traditional sense, not archived somewhere waiting for a revival conversation, just genuinely gone. The half of the series that Fox originally made is heading the same direction, and what you are left with is a show that won 6 Emmy Awards, reinvented the comedy format, and influenced virtually every prestige sitcom that followed it, quietly becoming lost media. That is the real story here, not simply how a brilliant show got canceled by Fox in 2006, but how it managed to get erased twice by 2 different corporations across 2 completely different eras of television. Arrested Development is the underdog that kept collecting awards while almost nobody watched, came back from the dead a decade later, and then got erased anyway. That arc is almost too cruel to be accidental. Almost. The concept took shape in the summer of 2002 when Ron Howard pitched an idea that sounded simple enough on paper: shoot a scripted comedy like a reality show. Handheld cameras, no laugh track, no fixed sets, no studio audience positioned to react on cue. At that point, every major network comedy looked like Friends or Everybody Loves Raymond, built around fixed cameras, broad reactions, and generous pauses engineered for the laugh track. Howard and creator Mitchell Hurwitz wanted to do the opposite of all of that, building a show that rewarded the audience for paying attention rather than simply showing up. Fox picked it up, and here is where the popular narrative gets seriously complicated, because the widely accepted version of this story casts Fox as the villain who mistreated the show until it had no choice but to die. That is not what the record actually shows. Fox placed Arrested Development in strong lineup positions, advertised it with genuine commitment, and renewed it across 3 seasons, despite ratings that would have ended most shows before episode 6. Season 1 averaged 6.2 million viewers, which sounds respectable until you compare it to the competition, where the top shows that season were pulling audiences in the 20s of millions. Against that backdrop, 6.2 million was a long way from where a network needed its investment to land. Fox kept it alive anyway, kept throwing resources at it, and the show kept winning awards while the audience stubbornly refused to arrive in the numbers that mattered commercially. 6 primetime Emmy nominations came in the first season alone, followed by the Outstanding Comedy Series win in September 2004, a Golden Globe, and critical adoration from essentially every outlet covering television. The Nielsen boxes, though, told a completely different story, and that contradiction defined the entire run. Season 2 shed viewers, and Season 3 averaged 3.9 million, down roughly 2 million from the season before it, which represented a contraction nobody at Fox could afford to ignore indefinitely. The episode orders reflected that reality: 22 episodes in Season 1, then 18, then 13. Fox was not sabotaging the show with those cuts. They were slowly, and not unkindly, acknowledging the mathematics of broadcast television. The final 4 episodes aired on a Friday night opposite the opening ceremony of the 2006 Winter Olympics, which is admittedly not ideal placement, but the show was already canceled by then and Fox had an Olympics audience worth protecting. The series finale ran on February 10, 2006, closing out 53 episodes and a run that collected 30 wins from 82 award nominations. The show ended because not enough people watched it during its original run, and that uncomfortable truth tends to get buried under the Fox villain mythology that followed. Before moving into the Netflix chapter, this show deserves a proper examination through the lens that matters to this channel, because Arrested Development contains one of the most recognizable vehicles in television comedy history. The Bluth Company Stair Car is a Ford F-350, a full-size heavy-duty truck cab attached to a mobile aircraft boarding stair unit. Big and slow and deeply impractical, with the Bluth Company logo running across the side in the kind of corporate branding that looks especially absurd once the company has collapsed. It became the family's primary mode of transport after their fortune evaporated, which tells you everything you need to know about the show's sense of humor in a single image. They went from owning a private jet to relying on the machine that used to load passengers onto it. 3 separate Ford F-350 truck cabs were used across the series, and the stair car is anything but subtle. Visually, it carries the personality of a man arriving at a formal dinner in a forklift, and that is entirely the point, because the Ford F-350 stair car functions as a physical metaphor for the Bluth family's circumstances rendered in steel and aviation-grade aluminium. The show never needed an expository scene explaining how far they had fallen, because every appearance of that vehicle communicated it instantly and without apology. The stair car accumulated enough cultural weight that when the Russo brothers, who had directed multiple Arrested Development episodes before going on to direct Avengers Endgame, came to stage the airport fight sequence in Captain America Civil War in 2016. They put a stair car in the background. That detail is not a casual Easter egg for sharp-eyed fans. It is a piece of Hollywood filmmaking mythology embedded inside one of the highest-grossing superhero films ever produced. A direct acknowledgement of what Arrested Development meant to two directors whose careers it helped shape. The Ford F-350 stair car as cultural artifact, showing up in a Marvel blockbuster, while the show it came from slowly becomes inaccessible. There is something almost poetic about that, though not in a way anyone involved would find particularly satisfying. Cameras started rolling again in August 2012, roughly 6 years after the Fox finale, and what followed was a genuinely unusual chapter in television history. Netflix, which at that point had only just begun commissioning original content, picked up Arrested Development for a 4th season, and on May 26, 2013, 15 new episodes appeared simultaneously on the platform. No weekly schedule, no broadcast window, no appointment viewing, just there all at once. This was not yet standard practice. House of Cards had launched in February of that year, and Orange is the New Black arrived 2 months after Arrested Development Season 4. Netflix was using these shows to announce what it intended to become. Nanspistruz and Arrested Development was one of the primary exhibits in that argument. The production itself became a structural experiment born of necessity. The cast had scattered across other projects during the intervening years, which meant assembling them all simultaneously for a conventional ensemble shoot was essentially impossible. Hurwitz responded by building Season 4 around individual storylines that overlapped and converged across episodes, with each installment following a single character through events that connected to what the other characters were doing elsewhere. The ambition was real, and so was the chaos. David Cross, who played Tobias Funke across all 5 seasons, described a production environment where reshoots were being scheduled weeks after original scenes had wrapped because someone had since thought of a sharper joke, which is not the kind of working rhythm that helps actors deliver their best performances. The format pushed the show into territory that divided audiences who had waited years for its return, and Netflix eventually acknowledged that division in the most literal way possible by releasing a completely reworked version of Season 4 in May 2018, a 22-episode remix retitled Fateful Consequences that recut the existing footage into a more conventional chronological structure. 2 versions of the same season, which is either a sign of genuine creative commitment or a quiet admission that the original cut had not quite landed the way anyone hoped. Probably both, if you were being honest about it. Season 5 arrived in 2 installments, with the first 8 episodes dropping on May 29, 2018, and the remaining 8 following on March 15, 2019. The season carried weight it had not asked for because accusations of misconduct had surfaced against Jeffrey Tambor, who played George Bluth Sr. throughout the series, and a 2018 New York Times roundtable interview with the cast became widely discussed for the way those accusations and the surrounding dynamics were handled in public. The season landed in a genuinely difficult cultural moment, and the reception reflected that difficulty. Jessica Walter, who played Lucille Bluth with a specific weaponized coldness that the show constructed entire storylines around, passed away in March in 2021, and the series lost something with her that no future version of it could replicate. Across all 5 seasons, the complete run reached 84 episodes, 22 Primetime Emmy nominations, 6 wins, 1 Golden Globe, 3 TCA awards, and a critical legacy that only strengthened with time. Rolling Stone placed it 15th on their 100 best sitcoms of all time in May 2021, and IGN ranked it 14th on their top 100 TV shows list as recently as March 2024. Here is where the story stops being merely interesting and starts being genuinely worth being angry about. In March 2023, the show nearly left Netflix with no arrangement in place at all, and a last-minute deal extended availability through March 2026. That deadline arrived, and all 5 seasons of Arrested Development departed the platform. Seasons 4 and 5, the ones Netflix itself commissioned and produced, are now unavailable on any streaming service, any rental platform, and any digital purchase option. For all practical purposes, they have been removed from accessible culture. Consider what that actually represents. Seasons 4 and 5 were Netflix originals, in the truest sense, commissioned by Netflix, financed by Netflix, used by Netflix to build the case that streaming could produce prestige television. Those seasons were part of the argument Netflix made to the industry and to subscribers about what the platform was becoming. They helped Netflix become the company it is today, and Netflix has responded by making them legally inaccessible. Not relocated to a different platform, not archived with a planned return date, just gone. The ownership structure is the reason this keeps producing the same impasse. Seasons 1 through 3 were produced by Imagine Television and 20th Century Fox Television for Fox Broadcasting, and Fox's acquisition by Disney means those original 53 episodes now sit in Disney's asset portfolio. Seasons 4 and 5 were co-produced with Netflix, which means any decision about their future requires agreement between two of the largest media companies currently operating. Until they reach that agreement, one of the most acclaimed comedies in television history simply cannot be watched through any legal channel, and neither company appears to be moving with any particular urgency to change that. The specific irony sitting at the center of this situation is worth dwelling on. Arrested Development Season 4 was among the opening moves Netflix made in its push from distribution platform to production studio, a proof of concept for what original streaming content could be. And the show is now trapped in exactly the kind of corporate licensing dispute that only became possible because streaming worked. The show helped demonstrate the model's viability, the model expanded, and created new forms of corporate complexity, and those new complexities have now consumed the show that helped generate them. The Russo brothers, who developed enough of their directorial craft on Arrested Development to eventually helm two of the highest-grossing films ever produced, put the Bluth Stair Car into Captain America: Civil War as an act of affection and professional respect. That Ford F-350, with its Bluth Company logo, now functions as one of the most visible monuments to what the show meant to the people who made it, visible to hundreds of millions of viewers in a blockbuster that will remain accessible indefinitely. The show itself is harder to watch legally than almost anything else from that era of television, which is a sentence that should not be possible to write in 2026. The possibility that Disney could bring the original 53 episodes to Disney Plus remains open, though no announcement existed as of early 2026. Whether a sixth season or any further continuation is workable given the current circumstances, with Tambor's involvement complicated, Walter having passed away, and the cast now 15 to 20 years older than when the show began, sits in genuinely uncertain territory. What is not uncertain is that the show's absence from legal platforms is not some administrative oversight or unavoidable technical situation. It is the direct result of two corporations choosing not to resolve it faster. Arrested Development averaged roughly 10 million views per year on Netflix during its final period on the platform, which is not a negligible number for a show that never exceeded 6.2 million live viewers at its broadcast peak. The audience did eventually find it, drawn by word of mouth and critical reputation rather than promotional placement, and found it too late for Fox to benefit, and apparently not in numbers large enough for Netflix to prioritize keeping it available. The show won the long game by every measure of cultural influence and critical reputation, and it is losing the short game of basic accessibility in a way that feels almost specifically designed to be infuriating. The hook at the opening of this piece framed this as a story about erasure, about the show that helped build streaming being erased by streaming. That framing holds up under scrutiny because Fox did not actually cancel Arrested Development in the way the mythology suggests. Fox sustained it longer than the ratings justified, and the audience that would have sustained it commercially simply did not materialize during the broadcast window. Streaming arrived and promised to fix exactly that problem, to let audiences discover extraordinary work on their own timeline rather than the networks. It delivered on that promise, and then it constructed a new category of problem that the original cancellation never could have produced. Arrested Development did not just get canceled, it got erased twice by two different institutions across 20 years, and the second erasure was somehow more complete than the first. The gap between what entertainment history records and what actually happened, between the official narrative and the documented reality, is the kind of story this channel keeps returning to, and there is a substantial amount more where this one came from.